Fiends and Fiends. Wizardly Warehouse Productions here again. And, you know, we've finished a couple of reviews by now. Hopefully, at least. And we wanted to break down how we actually go through our topical criteria.
Yeah, the objective criteria.
The lore, the difficulty of implementation, and the balance and the intrigue. So, just a quick go over on those things. Do you want to explain what lore and all those things are by our definition?
For sure. So as when you guys watch our reviews, we break down what we mean by lore and by difficulty and by balance and intrigue each time. But just to do it again, lore, we're talking about the world itself, kind of like the scene, and in particular we're talking about persons, places, and things that are in the work itself. And the questions that we came up with in regards to lore is stuff like, is there lore present in the work itself, right? So is it there in the first place for us to review and comment on? And does the lore, add, does it enhance the experience? Does it add to the world? Does it add to the experience? If so, how? If not, why? So those two questions are really loaded. And lots of material for us to discuss and kind of just provide a lot of material, for lack of better words and terms. But it is important for us to go through all of these objective criteria, even on something as short and as quick as, say, one magic item that's on the DM's Guild for $1 or for free even.
Exactly.
And we're going to explain to you why that is. Why would we have to still include and talk about the lore section even on a magic item that doesn't have lore? James, take it away.
So, to give you some context, we were sitting here, we were having coffee, and we were talking about how we want to actually explain why lore, the implementation, the balance, and the intrigue all matter. So let's work with one of the more simplistic in nature but difficult things to work with. Let's say there's a really super powered sword on the DM's Guild, and it's a legendary sword that one-shots anything. Mm-hmm. Like just and it's toast. Okay. Face value, how does that fit within our criteria? Mm-hmm. Well, if it's just the sword and it just gives the stats and things like that, we go to lore and we would say, okay, this sword doesn't have lore, so that criteria is NA.
Exactly. So that first question, is there lore present within the work itself? NA.
Exactly. So we would then move on, and of course, we would double back with our reviews as we're looking things over, and we'd, put ticks where they belong or X's where they need to be, right?
Yeah.
And we'd go to difficulty of implementation. Well, obviously, if it's a legendary sword that just one-shots things, well, it's not hard to put a sword into any campaign. So that's easy.
Yeah.
So I guess it would have to get a check mark there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next criteria, balance. This is a sword that one-shots anything. Okay.
That's where we start getting, you see where some of these the points and the scale start sliding a little bit more.
Exactly. So for the balance, it would take a huge hit. So the balance would go, well, how does it work within the lore? Well, there is no lore, so you can't remedy that.
And
right?
I was just going to say, right, when we're talking about balance, we're talking, yes, about the mathematical, like the stats and the mechanics, but we're also talking about play and lore. How do all these different items intermingle and balance themselves throughout the course of the work, or even in the case of just one magical item?
So I'm going to go on my little DM's tirade here and say, okay, this magical sword, this one-shotting sword, let's say it's just average, a +2. But here's why you can get away with having a one-shot sword that'll kill freaking anything. You make it almost impossible to get it to that point. So how would I implement this? I'd make this theoretical sword. That I don't think this is on the DM's Guild, and if it is, we're sorry, we didn't mean to.
No, not targeting anybody.
No. So I would make this sword. What's one of the more powerful things you can offset a physical power with an item? The major offset is lore.
Yeah.
Right?
And what we're talking about that is like attunement and the process that goes with that.
Exactly. So let's say I want to take this sword and I want to be able to use it to kill my big bad evil guy in one shot, but he's a lich, so I don't want to have to deal with the phylactery. This sword will make sure he's done forever. One hit, wham, boom, done. Cool. Okay. I go to try and figure this out, and on this sword, I find this inscription. And this inscription sends me to, it gives me like coordinates. And these coordinates then take me to a dungeon on the other arse end of the frickin' world. I then go there. I do a delve. And, it's a life-threatening delve, as most delves are. And then, I find out that to successfully escape this dungeon with this material that I need for this weapon, you keep putting in roadblocks like that to attune the sword and to make it and enhance its power and give it the ability to use that. Okay, you've taken like a year in game to hunt down all of these items, these rituals, and do all these things to strengthen this sword for one magical swing. That I could justify.
Yeah.
Because now, that year in game, how many sessions does that take? How, is there breaks between it? Are all the players in the group agreeing with this? Or is it, spread out over how long, right?
And can the sword accidentally fall out of its sheath and strike a squirrel?
Yeah.
And waste it all on that.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. That comes into the stat block balance. So the stat block balance would be, okay, yeah, let's say you do charge this sword up to its full strength and can one-shot anything. But here's the kick. The first thing it strikes, that's what it discharges the power on. Hope you don't fall into a tree.
Yeah.
Ow. Not only ow, but oop, there goes your charge.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how you can balance something so obscenely powerful. And that's the kind of depth we go into with as many reviews as possible.
110%. And that would just kind of wheel it back to what I started this all with, which is like our criteria. This is how I hope it's a little bit more clear to our viewers in terms of this is objective criteria that allows us to slide the scale and give an actually more reflective score for what's present there. Because like James perfectly outlined, right, a magic item with no lore is perfectly fine as long as these other sections of the difficulty to implement, the balance and some intrigue, a reason to pick the thing up, right? These different scores will then at the end of the day bring us to our final evaluation of something being objectively really good and that you should go pick up, or maybe something that you should be hesitant, because we're never going to go out and say absolutely don't do this unless something was just truly egregious. But also, we're not those type of content creators that want to just do the drama and harp on something that is bad, because the thing is more than likely, unless there's absolutely no reviews, and maybe if the reviews that are there are misleading, then maybe we would step in. I would say that would be the only time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, yeah, I honestly think you've got it there. I mean, yeah, we're not going out of our way to slander anything or push anything up onto some sort of pedestal. We literally, that's something that I think we would appreciate seeing more of in a lot of things. I'm a big Destiny 2 fan, so I watch a lot of videos on the Crucible and Strikes and all that stuff, and I appreciate that sort of information in those reviews. So, I would appreciate that stuff with D&D, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of that going around, so we're stepping up. We're going to do it, and we want to be that fair, equitable, middle ground. We're not going to tear something down,
No.
but we are going to be honest about it.
No, exactly. Yeah, something like at the end of the day, we're here to support and build up the community by shining lights on just really good pieces of work, whatever they may be. And yeah, exactly like you said, no slander, just sticking to the objective criteria, and that's why we wanted to take this moment to kind of explain it to you guys a little bit more in depth. Do you mind if I just kind of, I guess, explain each section really quick?
Go for it, yeah.
Right, so I already explained lore, but I'll do it again just in case. So lore, we're talking about the world as a whole, if we're doing like a campaign setting or a one-shot. But at the very minimum, we're talking about the lore that pertains to either people, places, or things. So in the case of our example of a magic item, then I'm talking about the lore that is on that magic item, right? Is it present? Yes or no? If it is, does it enhance the work? If so, how? If not, why not?
And sorry, if I may interject, here's a way a magic item might not enhance the work. It was just dropped down by the gods. Lackluster lore can be very apparent.
Agreed. And I would just say lackluster in any of those criteria is what ends up giving a lower score to it, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to get at is we give people higher scores if the DM and the players have less work to do. For us, that's what is indicative of a really good supplement, is if it's something that can be picked up and implemented with ease and, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, overall, like, there's, like you were saying, how does it enhance the lore? How does it enhance the world? Does it enhance certain things like
gameplay even? Right?
Exactly. So if it is a game-breaking sword, like the one in the example, the one-shotter, okay. But if the lore is consistent with forcing the players to do enough to actually earn it, maybe this is a DM thing.
Yep.
It's up to the DM. Is it worth it? Right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that fine-tuned balancing.
100%. And I was going to say, that's why in difficulty, which is the next subject I'm going to talk about, that's why one of our questions, the last one, is the difficulty of implementing it, is the payoff of the difficulty of implementing it worth it, essentially?
Exactly.
So that's how that ties in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sorry, I'm stepping on your toes.
It's okay. It's all good.
So with the sword, like if the sword came with all this lore and told you, like, just do a random dungeon, but at the end of the dungeon include this trap, this scenario, and it gave you the step-by-step walkthrough for that year-long journey to attune the sword.
A lot of points with us. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly. That would be great.
Yeah.
But if it's just magical sword, one-shots anything after a year's worth of journeying for attunement, it's probably going to score pretty low for us.
Agreed. Even if that's what the DM who uses this magic item does, that's their choice. But again, it's about creating a piece of work that is laid out more than it needs to be, so that the DM can do what a DM does, which is like either, they choose to what degree they're like. At the end of the day, the objective criteria also helps us recognize really good pieces of work that are created by creators, because at the end of the day, if you have a crappy DM but you have the best written campaign possible, you're still going to have a really crappy experience. And so that's why we're rating the material, right? And again, why difficulty is a subject that we talk about.
Exactly. And like the last one, balance, it's really kind of a frustrating one to work with because of how much it intertwines itself with everything.
And the rest of the 4 other pillars that we have.
Exactly. Even intrigue.
Yeah.
Even the intrigue, right? Because if I see this beautiful artwork about a wonderful sword, and I find out that it's a super powerful sword,
and there's no lore,
I'd be like, what?
Letdown. Huge letdown. Yep.
Right? And that's how the balance ties into everything. So it is a very difficult one to like pull apart, but that's what we're doing,
Yes.
so you don't have to.
Exactly. So just to finish off the descriptions, right? Difficulty, when we're talking about difficulty, we're talking about how difficult is it for a DM to implement at their table, and how difficult is it for the players to implement with their characters. For example, if it's a magical item, how can they implement that to their class, to their story, right? The arc, things of that nature. And yeah, and then also just the difficulty of, I would say, running the said item one-shot campaign in terms of like just like intuitively, I guess.
Exactly.
Right?
And
Sorry, last
Yeah,
thing was just the different experience levels inherent. We always talk about that because us being experienced players and DMs of varying levels, like I'm rather new to DMing, James is rather experienced, and we both have the same level of player experience. James a little bit more, but our player experience is very high. So when we break down difficulty, we also keep this in mind in terms of people's skill level, and we talk about that. Something might be actually no problem to implement if you are experienced DM and you know how to run things on the fly, but a new DM might struggle with something that doesn't have enough guidelines. So that's just an example.
exactly. You know what? You hit that one on the head for me.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, no.
I was just going to say, you already covered everything in balance. I explained the definition in terms of, we look at balance in terms of the stats, the mechanics, the play, and I mean that in terms of both role playing as well as like the actual like how it plays at the table, like mechanics and like rolling dice and all that, as well as the lore and how that all intertwines. James covered that beautifully. And the questions that we have in there reflect that and tie it all together. And then the last one was intrigue, and we mean that in terms of what is the main draw? What draws somebody to click on the page in the first place on the DMs Guild and even look at something?
Is it that beautiful artwork of that awesome sword?
Yep.
Or is it
The description.
the description?
And the person's diction and how they have written something so eloquently and maybe intriguing that lends to the theme of whatever work it is.
Or is this work created by someone that you've heard their name thrown around before? Like everybody, or most everyone, I'm sure, knows who Matt Mercer, the DM Lord, is.
Right? Exactly. He posts anything on the DMs Guild and it becomes adamantine like within an hour. That in and of itself, again, that goes into our intrigue, and that's part of the criteria and the question that I ask in terms of, is this coherent and indicative of the author, right? And
Right.
if it's a first-time author, I will be honest and say, well, I honestly don't know. This is their first ever released material, right?
Or we might even just have to fully admit, like, you know, maybe we haven't heard of them,
Yeah.
and we need to do more research on that.
100%.
Because this, like we've said before, I guess in our final sentiments of this video here, we're honest. We steep ourselves in as much honesty, integrity, and honor as we can, because world's got enough of the other stuff.
110%.
All right?
We don't want you to have to try and read between the lines on our show here at all.
No.
And this is why we made the objective criteria. We still do have our own personal opinions on things. We always say them in the reviews, and we let you know. We advertise when we're saying, in my opinion, or that's a personal gripe of mine. That is James's like favorite go-to word, which is fantastic because we have to have catchphrases like this to help you guys. That's honestly everything I have to say, James.
Yeah. We thank you for watching this, and you know, we hope this kind of explains the objective criteria and just the
approach that we take to reviews.
Exactly. And just this video is as much for you as it is for us, so that we can hold ourselves accountable to
Right
you.
110%. Couldn't agree more. Sorry, I get really passionate. But yes. So couldn't agree more. As always, guys, be sure to check out all of our work and updates and all that in the description below, to our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter, So much.
Social media.
Yeah, all below. And just be sure to check out this channel for the rest of our work. To just see all the reviews that we're talking about, and to support us. We have a Patreon. We would be so gracious
Absolutely.
and grateful if you were to support us, as well as just subscribe and clicking that bell icon. Best way to stay in tune with all the stuff that we have going on here in the Wizardly Warehouse.
Like you said, ring that bell, hit that like button, leave us some comments, shout us out on social media, and if you can't support us on Patreon, don't feel bad. Just share us around. Share us with your friends and just spread the word. That's all we can ask. We thank you all very much for your viewership, and we will see you through the rift.